Hello and welcome. My name is Nikolas, they, he, she, and today we are looking at and talking about Static Season 1, part of the Milestone Return series by writers Vita Ayala, Reginald Hudlin, and Greg Pak, artists Nikolas, Draper-Ivey, ChrisCross, Denny's, Cowan, Bill Sienkiewicz, Ryan Benjamin, Khoi Pham, Jimmy Palmiotti, Don Ho, Scott Hanna, letters by Andworld, design, additional colors by Chris Sotomayor, Will Quintana, Alex Sinclair, and Hi-Fi, originally published between August 2021 and May 2022. This collected trade was published in 2022 by DC Comics, copyright Milestone Media. Link in the cards to my review of Static Shock, Trial by Fire, and Rebirth of the Cool for a rundown of Milestone Media. I picked this book up for the Realm of Comics Book Club. I'm running pretty far behind on that, but I'm going to keep engaging as best I can and would highly recommend you all check out. Not part of DC's official young adult label, My Library, Goodreads, and WorldCat all categorize this as a young adult comic, so take that rating as you will. Content notes for militarized police, fighting anti-black racism, body horror, developing superpowers, and burning houses. Going through the creative team, linking the cards to Shuri, Search for Black Panther, plus 24/7 Vibranium, because that covers the first book I reviewed written by Vita Ayala. That said, I didn't actually do a creator bio, so here we go. According to their website, quote, Vita Ayala is a trans non-binary Afro-Puerto Rican writer born and bred in New York City, where they grew up dreaming dreams of dancing on faraway worlds, fighting monsters on the block, and racing fish along the bottom of the ocean. Before Vita began freelancing as a writer, they worked in book retail, event coordination, building management, baking, and museum security. Day and graveyard shift. They've broken at least one of every bone in their body, which means they can feel the rain coming. Vita writes both comics and prose fiction and has written for publishers such as Black Mass Studios, DC Comics, Dynamite, IDW, Image Comics, Macmillan, Marvel Comics, Realm, Valiant, and Vault Comics. Vita currently resides in New York City with their wife and cat sons. End quote. On the other hand, while I've reviewed some stuff by Reginald Hudlin, that was all before the Great Channel reset. I am also transitioning from Christopher Priest's run on Black Panther to Reginald Hudlin's, but that hasn't happened quite yet either. So clicking through to his website, the intro to the Reginald Hudlin story is, quote, Reginald Hudlin is unique in the entertainment business because of his success as a writer, producer, director, and executive. To quote cultural critic Jimmy Israel, quote, Hudlin is a modern-day Gordon Parks, a true monster in the game who totally redid the blueprint, what some people used to call a Renaissance man. I dig him because he made me think outside of the box. Hudlin writes and directs movies, pens a comic book, and he was running BET. That's multitasking for your ass. End quote and end quote. Second link in the cards to Marvel Voices Identity. Greg Pak contributed to the anthology, but I didn't actually profile them there either. Clicking to his website page, it opens with, quote, Greg Pak is an American comic book writer and film director. Pak is best known for his work on books published by Marvel Comics, including X-Men, most notably Extreme X-Men, several titles featuring the Hulk, including Planet Hulk, which was one of the storylines eventually adapted into the film Thor Ragnarok, and Hercules. In 2019, Pak began writing Star Wars comics for Marvel. End quote. Clicking over to Nikolas Draper-Ivey's website, he is, quote, an American illustrator based outside of New York City. Born in Lansing, Michigan in 1991, he grew up in Detroit, where his father first exposed him to Japanese animation with Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira. In his adolescence, he discovered Shonen Jump magazine. This inspired him to pursue a career as a professional illustrator. In 2010, he began his first semester at Savannah College of Arts and Designs, SCAD, in Georgia as a sequential art major with a minor in illustration. His style plays heavily on use of light and shadow and combines Afrofuturist elements with hints of fantasy, hip-hop, and punk culture, and his lovely cinematography. His two biggest influences are Roger Jerkins, director of cinematography for Blade Runner 2049, and Takeshi Obata, artist for Hikaru no Go, Death Note, Bakuman, Platinum End. In 2014, after moving to New York City, he had the chance to meet with his idols, editor Koshi Yoshida and mangaka Takashi Obata, who praised his early work as a successful fusion of his Eastern and Western influences. He further experimented with this blend with his first serialized work, Zoogenesis. In a short span of time, his artwork has become a source of inspiration to many artists in the Black community. The recognition afforded him the opportunity to create album artwork for Marvel's Black Panther: The Album, produced by Kendrick Lamar. Currently, Draper-Ivey is working on his original work, Dream Vesper. He firmly believes that his unique Afro-Asian futuristic art style can change the world. End quote. Circling back to Wikipedia, Christopher Williams, aka ChrisCross, quote, is a comic book illustrator known mostly for his distinct stints penciling Milestone Comics, Blood Syndicate, and Heroes, Marvel Comics Captain Marvel, and Slingers, and DC Comics Firestorm. End quote. Another reason to check out my review of Static Shock, Trial by Fire, and Rebirth of the Cool is because I profile Dennis Cowan there. He is also one of the original creators of Static Shock. So cool! Returning to Wikipedia once again, Boleslav William Felix Robert Sienkiewicz is, quote, an American artist known for his work in comic books, particularly for Marvel Comics' New Mutants, Moon Knight, and Elektra Assassin. Sienkiewicz's work in the 1980s was considered revolutionary in mainstream U.S. comics due to his highly stylized art that verged on abstraction and made use of oil painting, photorealism, collage, mimeography, and other forms generally uncommon in comic books. End quote. Over on his website, Ryan Benjamin describes himself as, quote, professional artist who started his career in comics in 1994 with Image Comics, which later branched off to become Wildstorm Comics. He continues to work in the comic book industry with companies such as Marvel, DC Comics, Dark Horse, Acclaim, and Valiant Comics. End quote. Pham's website appears to be currently offline, but according to comicartfans.com, he is a, quote, illustrator and art mentor. His works include DC's Teen Titans, Marvel's Mighty Avengers, X-Men Legacy, Scarlet Spider, Spider-Man, Daredevil, Chaos Wars, Incredible Hercules, Gambit, Mighty Thor, X-Factor, and Top Cow's Cyberforce. He has done numerous cover illustrations for various publications. End quote. Clicking through to paperfilms.com, Jimmy Palmiotti is described as, quote, a multi-award-winning comic book creator with a wide range of experience and background in advertising, production, editorial, film, writing, production, media presentation, and video game development. Just a few of his clients include Nike, Disney, Warner Brothers, Lionsgate, Fox, and New Line, 2K Games, and THQ Nordic. End quote. For lack of any other write-ups, Don Ho is an inker who is credited on Comic Vine with over 150 issues, including Michael Turner's Fathom, Cannon Hawk, Justice League America, Black Panther, The Incredible Hulk, and The Darkness / Superman, among many others. Circling back to comic art fans, Scott Hanna is described as, quote, a top inker in the comic book industry. Scott Hanna has been drawing and inking comics for 30 years. His work has been published in over 100 graphic novels, and he's inked well over 21,000 pages of comic art. End quote. Clicking through to LinkedIn, Will Quintana is, quote, driven to create memorable, dynamic art, striving to impart my knowledge and experience in the contribution of creative digital media. Specialties, digital painting, lettering, publishing, and photo retouching. Expertise in Photoshop. End quote. And last but certainly not least, we have Alex Sinclair, who is a Mexican colorist who is described on Wikipedia as, quote, well known for his collaborations with Jim Lee and Scott Williams. He has previously worked on Astro City, Alan Moore's Top 10, Harley Quinn, and with Lee and Williams on Batman, Hush, Superman, Wildcats, Gen 13, Divine Right, All-Star Batman and Robin, Infinite Crisis, and 52. End quote. Keywords that came to mind reading this volume of Static was racial justice, augmented humans, environmental racism, gas masks, and a largely orangey color scheme with a splash of blues. The summary over on Goodreads is, quote, at long last, the most famous face of the Milestone Universe makes his shocking return. Bullied nerd Virgil Hawkins wasn't the kind of kid you'd normally find on the streets at a protest. But like everyone else in the city of Dakota, he was fed up. Unfortunately, the first time he stood up to raise his voice, the world turned upside down. The experimental tear gas released that day left some of his classmates maimed or dead, but it left Virgil and others with stunning new abilities. Virgil has powers inside him now. Real power. The ability to channel and manipulate electromagnetic fields, but there's anger burning inside him too. What is he supposed to do about all of this? And first and foremost, what is he supposed to do about his bullies now that they've got superpowers too? End quote. Looking at the writing and art, while it is a superhero comic, it was a very good superhero comic. I don't mean to disparage superhero comics. I enjoy many of them, but like some of the middle grade comics or YA comics that are good for their demographic, they don't always have the biggest crossover appeal. A good intro though, as it is pretty fun, fast-paced, and easy to follow. The art sometimes felt a smidge rushed / overly simple, but still felt above average compared to other superhero comics. Needless to say, I've read some real stinkers, superhero or otherwise. As someone who read the original Static Shock Origin not too long ago, I thought this was a real nice reboot that combined the best of the old and melding it with what's happening now. As I already mentioned, I'm right on the cusp of revisiting Reginald Hudlin's original run on Black Panther, and it similarly felt like an interesting modern perspective on the kind of thing I appreciated about that run as well. Looking at representation, race is obviously at the focus of Static Shock, both as a character and as a vital part of Milestone's origin story and legacy of Black creators telling Black stories. And it's been a minute since I finished this particular volume, as my reviews are really lagging behind my energy to review, so correct me if I'm wrong, ability versus disability felt largely explored through the lens of real-world able-bodiedness versus super ability. So not exactly the same thing, but definitely a focus. Gender was pretty well balanced on the binaries. Sexuality was pretty one note, although not really a focus. Obviously working class setting, but I don't recall much exploration of that. Overall, I would rate this volume 4 stars and recommend to anyone who thinks it sounds interesting. Bye y'all, keep reading and organize to end capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.